We were aware of that, very much so, because I mean we grew up. It wasn't just that the country was divided, but West Germany was a democratic country, like the UK is one, and East Germany was a dictatorship with like, I don't know, that is, to say like North Korea is probably, that's not quite true, because the dictatorship here was never as strict, but of course we were sort of closed off from the rest of the world, all the Eastern European countries, and we were aware of that. When we were like at home, we could talk openly about politics and about things that were on our minds, but we knew very well that as soon as we went outside, we didn't talk about politics, we didn't mention it, because we would get into danger of saying the wrong thing and then maybe being arrested. So when we grew up, we were well aware of the division, and we were well aware of what it meant to live, you know, in East Germany with all this kind of repression from the government.
So growing up, were you very aware of the presence of the Stasi and things?
No, I have to say no, because you know I'm from a little village, and my parents were not in the opposition, and I wasn't. I was, as I said, you know, I was 19 when the war came down, so I knew the Stasi existed, and I knew what they could do, or I thought I knew what they could do, but I never got into contact with them. I was never questioned, I was never asked to join or anything like that, so I never experienced anything. And after the war came, like me, I mean that's the majority of people. The majority of East Germans never got into contact with the Stasi, because we were all living our lives as quietly as possible. And only a very small number actually dared to really resist, and they dared to be critical. And so after the wall came down, we learned how much the Stasi was involved in our everyday life, and that was a real shock to us. You know, like that in every school class there was one person who spied for the Stasi. In every school there was at least 2 or 3 teachers spying for the Stasi. In every university, you know, like suddenly it came out, you know, this one's roommate was a member of the Stasi, and we knew that they had quite a dense network, but we didn't know that it was so traumatic.
Sorry, so since the war came down, there's obviously been a lot of change, but is there anything that hasn't really changed all that much?
For East Germans, no. I mean, our lives have really changed completely. For the West Germans, nothing has changed. I mean, except that now, when they go east, it's not a different country, but it's still Germany. I mean, that's still the tragic of the unification, that for one part of society, really everything, the entire life has changed completely, and for the other part, nothing has changed, and sometimes there are tensions about that. Yes.
When the wall came down and you first got your chance to go over to West Germany, what provisions were there for you to live over there? Because presumably you didn't have any Deutschmarks.
Well, every East German who crossed the border after the wall came down got 100 D-Mark from the West German government. You could go to any post office, and they gave you the money, and they put a little stamp in your passport, and so they knew that you had got this. They called it welcoming money. And back then, 100 D-Mark was quite something. And I didn't really need any. I just bought some, you know, chocolate, and some clothes, but you know, I didn't really, because I stayed with relatives and they provided everything else, so I didn't need it anymore. And then on the 1st of July 1990, so roughly half a year after the wall came down, we had our monetary union. It means that the D-Mark was introduced in East Germany. So even before the unification, we had D-Mark here. Now, and that was quite an interesting day, because the day before we had all these kind of East German things in our shops, and then they closed, and the next morning when we had D-Mark, they opened and the shops were full of West German things. That was amazing to see. You couldn't really buy any East German stuff anymore. People didn't want to buy that. They only wanted to buy West German things, and they had it in the shop within 24 hours. Yeah, well, go ahead.
Oh, Tom's question.
Yeah, I was going to say, were any or many people unhappy about reunification?
I think back when it happened, no. But nowadays, you have a lot of people who said it was a mistake, mainly people who lost their jobs in the 90s, and who didn't really get comfortable with the new situation. I mean, especially older people who had lived all their lives in East Germany, and now they suddenly lived in a country where they had to make decisions, where they had choices. And if you, for 40 years, if you had someone who told you exactly what to do, who told you what to study, who told you what to buy, you know, whatever, it's so hard suddenly to make choices. Like sometimes I'm in the supermarket buying cereal, and I say, you know, gosh, I'm East German, that's too much variety for me here. It's a joke, but what some people really experience. And so nowadays there are some people, not a lot, but some who think the unification was a mistake. But also on the West German side, because they think that the West German economy has gone down because it had to support the East Germans, which, you know, I don't. So, their opinion.
Is there anything you miss from East German?
No. No, not at all, to be honest. No.
Was there any negative feeling towards the British because of Margaret Thatcher's opposition to reunification?
No, because really, no offense, but back then we thought that what was important was the Soviet Union and the USA. You know, there was a lot of French opposition, and I mean for a reason. I mean we know that we have this legacy of World War II, and especially French, because they are our neighbors. They were very concerned about it, and so Great Britain too, but we didn't really care about it in those days. And it hasn't turned out, you know, we don't scare people anymore. So it went quite well. But no, I have to say there aren't. If you talk to people, there aren't any hard feelings against British people. I mean, Great Britain has a very good, or we have a very friendly attitude towards Britain and you guys.
Can I ask, I mean, obviously Angela Merkel's a high-profile East German that's made it to the top in German society, sort of across media, politics, business. How would you say it's been for East Germans in the last 20 years?
Well, you can't, because she really tried to avoid concentrating on her person as an East German. So we haven't really, I mean, we know it, she is from East Germany, but her politics has not really had any effect on East Germans also.
Right.
It's kind of a thing to be proud of, but to be honest, I'm more proud of the fact that she's a woman. She's our first female chancellor. Then she's from the East, because she never really focused on that.
Mm-hmm. How many other people are there in the East who are, say, in film and television or high up in industry? Has anybody broken into Mercedes-Benz, for example, on board level? Sort of, in terms of opportunities?
Industry, not a lot. TV, quite a lot. But for some, you can't even tell. I mean, the older ones I've seen on East German TV, or I know they are from the East. The younger ones, you know, My mom, when she watches sports, she always says, "Oh, he's one of us." So there are a lot of sportsmen, a lot of really good sportsmen are from East, or were born in East Germany, like Michael Ballack, as you know, might have heard this name. And people who actually speak German, they know that he speaks a very, very distinguished Saxon accent. So you can tell when you hear him talking. And but for most you don't even know anymore.
Does a unified Germany still feel quite a new thing to kind of you and your generation, or have you kind of started to get, well, not started to get used to it, obviously you're used to it now, but does it still kind of now and again you kind of think about it and still think that's actually quite something?
Yeah, well, yes, of course, every day. No, not every day, but as I said, it was probably the most important event in my life. So in my family we still talk about it quite a lot, and yeah, I sometimes think, where would I be today if this didn't happen, you know? What would I do now? And, I don't know, probably would have killed myself. So, you know, you haven't heard that. Yes, so I think especially in my generation it's still a big issue, because it has changed our lives, and I think most of the people of my generation, we were young enough to cope with it, to really exploit the opportunities that were given to us, and so for us it's mainly a positive thing.
How were adherents to the church treated in East Germany?
Okay, we had this talk. Well, actually, churches were allowed in East Germany, but they were not promoted, and they were kind of, especially pupils who were in church, they were often ridiculed in school. Not so much by other school children, but rather by teachers. And the government tried a lot of things to keep people away from the churches. Now, what they did in the 1960s was they blew up a number of churches, amongst them one here in Leipzig. Don't know if you've been to the Augustusplatz and you see the new university and a thing that looks like a church. It's actually not, it's just a facade, but there was the old university church that was blown down in 1968, and it was like totally normal church. It was destroyed in the war and rebuilt and then blown down, and just to show that the government was more powerful than the churches. And when I grew up, it wasn't really a problem anymore, but especially in the 1950s and 1960s, children who went to get their do you say communion or confirmation, they got into a lot of troubles, because you've got this card here, and it says, "Come with us to the Jugendweihe." And Jugendweihe was kind of a civic initiation ritual at the age of 14, and it was to contrast the confirmation. And especially in the 1950s and 1960s, people had to make a decision: either go to this Jugendweihe or go to confirmation. And if they didn't go to Jugendweihe, they got into trouble at school. Some were not allowed to go to college. Now, when I was in school in the 1980s, they did both. Or we did both. We had confirmation, and then we had this civic ritual, which was important because you had to pledge allegiance to East Germany. As a 14-year-old, you had to say, I will be an obedient citizen, and you had to swear that you do this. So that was not just a thing to do, but it had a political connotation. But as I said, in the 1980s, you could do both, and they allowed that. All right, if there aren't any more questions, I've prepared something quickly.